better lower your expectations. Steve's always talking a big game. My sobriety date is January 16, 2008. My home group is the Whitsing group, and it's in Asheville, North Carolina. So if you guys are ever in town visiting, it's at 8 o'clock on Monday nights, and then sometimes every other week we have a campfire meeting, but I'm never there on the weekend, so I never get to go to that one. It's a great group, but I hear people say, like, that's my home group's the best group, and I don't feel that way. I just moved back there, and I miss my group in Durham. I used to be at the Basics group, and when I moved to Chapel Hill, I said they didn't do AA like they did it in Asheville, and now I'm back in Asheville, and I say they don't do it like they do in Chapel Hill and Durham. So it's just wherever I am. That's how it goes, I guess. I have a sponsor she's a huge part of my life, and I'll get into her about that later, and I have sponsees. And I have this, my sponsor gave me this a long time ago, and I love it. It kind of sums up sobriety for me, so I'm just going to start out. It's from As Bill Sees It, and it's titled A New Life. Is sobriety all we are to expect of a spiritual awakening? No, sobriety is only a bare beginning. It is only the first gift of the first awakening. If more gifts are to be received, our awakening has to go on. As it does go on, we find that bit by bit we can discard the old life, the one that did not work, for a new life that can and does work under any conditions whatever. Regardless of worldly success or failure, regardless of pain or joy, regardless of sickness or health or even death itself, a new life of endless possibilities can be lived if we are willing to continue our awakening through the practice of AA's 12 steps. And for me, I never would have, if you would have told me when I came into my first AA meeting at 15 that I would love Alcoholics Anonymous, I would not have believed you. I was sent there by the courts, and I hated it. And today I found this all to be true for me. And, the AA steps, even in themselves, I was so resistant for years. Even in sobriety, I was getting in trouble. And I'm just really grateful for a good sponsor who told me it wasn't about me, it was about taking action, and that's what I found to be true. AA has always been doing things I don't want to do and being willing to be uncomfortable. I hate speaking. I said I would never do it. And I said it in the beginning, and my sponsor just smiled and shook her head. I was like, I don't know what she's smiling at, and now I get it. She also asked me in the beginning, and I know I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but she asked me when I got sober, she said, are you willing to go any length to get sober? And I was so desperate that second time around, I told her I was, and I didn't really know what that meant. And then she asked if I were willing to pass on so freely what had been given to me. And I said yes, but I also thought to myself, I'm never sponsoring anybody. And today I never would have believed it, when she told me this, but sponsoring has been one of the best parts of my life. And when it talks about being the bright spot, I really do believe that. There's nothing like getting out of myself and trying to help somebody else. But it's not always the easiest thing, or not always the thing I want to do before I do it. So anyways, I grew up, so I'm in Asheville now, but I'm from Waldorf, Maryland. And I grew up on a horse farm and a petting zoo. My mom, she's always loved crazy animals, and we had wallabies and a zebra, llamas, a humping llama. So we have the craziest animals growing up. And I have 4 sisters, 1 stepsister, and 3 real. And I got a stepdad and dad. And we all lived on the farm together for a period, so that's kind of weird. We, my parents started fighting when I was little, but I didn't really think much. I was always a daddy's girl, and my mom, I blamed her for years. I hated my mother. I thought it was her fault that her and my dad fought, and I had no idea her side of the situation until getting sober and being able to do step work and see that. But anyway, so they started fighting when I was pretty young. I don't remember exactly when, but I remember she kicked my dad out to live at the barn. He built a trailer on the side of the barn, and I was like, all right, now I do feel a little different. I'm going to Dad's house when I'm walking to the barn, and I go to school, and looking back, I always wanted to be in somewhere different. And I would go to horse camps. I grew up with riding horses and in 4-H, and I always wanted to be somewhere different, with a different family, or stay at horse camp. And back then I thought, if you had the family I had, you would too. And then through doing step work, I've been able to realize that it didn't matter where I was. I could have been the best family. To me, they are the best family, but I could have been any situation. I still wanted to be somewhere different. And that's why alcohol works so well. And when I found that let me escape to where I wanted to go, or where I thought I wanted to go. And so anyways, my family is I asked my mom one time, I said, how do you describe us? And she said, effing crazy. I was our family. And I was like, well, whatever floats your boat. But that's, I love my family. They are a little crazy and hyper, and there was a lot of fighting, but there was a lot of love. They loved me how they knew how to love me. And my dad got locked up when I was little, and my mom raised us. She had the 4 girls and 100-some animals, and I blamed her for all those years. And now I get to see, like, I probably would have been the exact same as her, trying to raise 4 daughters and all these animals by myself, taking us to visit my dad in jail. And I've been able to grow a deep respect for her now through this program, just one of the other gifts. But anyway, so I grew up on that farm, and I was a really good kid, I think, for maybe a little bit. I don't really know when that, for a little bit. And then, I was riding horses, I was playing sports, and I was doing really well in school. Whenever they would start fighting, I would really escape in school and do pretty well in terms of like math and science, never with reading. And I was talking to someone today, they were like, oh, her friend, she's dating this guy, and they're both, I think, like 66, 67. She said he doesn't know how to read, and I was like, well, I would not know how to read if it weren't for Alcoholics Anonymous, so I totally get where he's coming from. And it's like I got pushed through school because they just wanted to pass me. Like, no one really asked questions, And that's really what happened when I got in trouble, too. They're like, oh, she's young, just pat me on the hand and send me on my way. So I did really well with math and science. I didn't do so well in reading, but I still, somehow got pushed through school. And I was doing sports. I was doing softball and soccer and riding horses. And I know that on the school bus I started to get in fights with this one particular boy, and that was kind of like, when I look back, I'm like, I think that's the only time I really got in trouble at a young age. And, my dad would always send us to get his beer and we'd have sips, but I didn't think anything of it. And then in middle school was when I started to get in trouble. So when I hit 12, now up to this point too, my one sister got pregnant at 14, and I was like, I will never do that. I was like, I will never touch a boy. And then my other sister was doing drugs and drinking, and I said I would never do that. And all these nevers, and I was doing the exact same thing when I turned 12. It's when I started messing around with alcohol, and everything changed. So we all got caught at middle school with the little shot glass drinks that they have on airplanes, and all those kids admitted it, and I was like, I am not admitting that. So I lied, I knew how to lie, and I got out of it, and I got to stay in middle school. But at the same time, I thought, I knew how to lie and be manipulative. When DSS would come around, I would lie, and I would always stick up for my family, and I still will today, But it's like I knew how to get my way from a really young age. But the other part of me was full of fear and terrified to break the rules. So it was it really was 2 different sides. And, up to this point, too, I had really good friends that were straight A, super smart people. They're a whole different level. And then I started finding people who were like my sisters, who were getting in trouble and having fun, and I started having fun with them. And so I got to stay in middle school. I still did pretty good. I was in honors band. I was doing stuff now I look back, I'm like, what was I doing? I don't even know. But I didn't really start drinking heavy at that point at all. I was just messing around with things. And then at 14, I started 9th grade at this point. That's when I started hanging out with 4-H kids, and I remember telling my mom, I'm going to go out with them. She didn't care because we never really had rules growing up. And I went out and came home at 3 or 4 a.m., and I got wasted, and I remember bits and pieces, but I remember blacking out because I don't remember all of it, and it was that was my drinking career. I was a blackout drinker, and, at first it was funny. They would say things, and I was like, oh, it's so funny. I didn't even know what I did. And then it got to a point where I started being really aggressive, and it wasn't funny anymore. But I do remember, I don't remember much of that night, but I do remember taking that drink and then having those feelings of being different, being from a different family, or not feeling a part of, and all the other feelings of just having my head constantly spinning. That stopped when I drank, and I didn't have to think about any of it. I went home that night. I don't know, it was early morning. I got home. She never said anything to me, my mom, and so then I knew, I was like, well, I can do whatever I want. And that was pretty much the start of my drinking career, where everything went downhill. So I was in 9th grade at this point. I think I was 14. My first trip to the psych ward was a couple months later. And I was a blackout drinker, and I started with McCormick's vodka. And I remember that with pink lemonade, and I still cannot look at pink lemonade to this day. And, I never drank it it never tasted good. I was drinking for the effect produced by alcohol, period. So then I would drink the alcohol, black out, and I thought that was a good time because I was able to get out of my head and not know what was happening. And then I started getting really violent, and my dad said, our family gets mean with alcohol. He said, try drinking beer or switching your liquor around. So I tried switching to beer, and I was still getting in fights, and it didn't help at all. And, through this period, I continued to do 4-H. I stopped doing sports. I quit band. I changed that group of friends to a different group of friends. I was like on the pom squad. I got kicked off. I was getting kicked out of everything. And we went to these 4-H camps. I got drunk and started driving a motorhome through the fairgrounds. Got kicked out of that, And this whole time I'm like cussing people out left and right. I went from being this really goody good two-shoe, like I would almost pee my pants if someone yelled at me. I was so scared, to being someone who was telling teachers where to put it. In 14, I got like 28 piercings. I was 30 pounds lighter, and I was cussing everyone. And that pretty much sums up, like that period between 14 and 18, that's what my life was like. And all the things I said I wouldn't do, I started to do. I wasn't going to drink and drive. I was drinking and driving. I started, when I got in trouble, it was because I was a really obnoxious drunk, and I would black out and fight people. And I think, when I was sober, I was mean, but I wasn't, I would cuss people out and like threaten them, but I wouldn't go as far as like attacking them like I would when I was drinking. And so I started to get arrested, and they sent me to my first meeting at 15. I told my mom I was going to this bar, and she said, okay. I had thought, maybe I just didn't hear her correctly, but she ended up sending her undercover cop friend to that bar, who found me, took me out by a pressure point, dragging me out of the bar, and I started cussing out the cops. And I remember bits and pieces of kicking their car with my heels on and telling them where to put it, and then they took me to the psych ward, So it was like these multiple trips. That's how my drinking went towards the end of, or the middle of my drinking, I guess. And I thought I was having a good time, and I think maybe 1 out of 10, I probably had a good time, And the other times I was hurting friends and hurting family members, and it talks about being a tornado through people's lives, and at the time I didn't see it. Like I thought I justified it. Oh, if you had a mom like I did, you would too. And I, through these steps, I've been able to see that it was, never about them. It's always been about me. And that alcohol, was just an escape method for me, and the way I treated people was never justified. So anyways, I kept drinking through high school. I got caught drunk in high school. They were kicking me out, and this time I couldn't get out of it like I did in middle school. So my mom withdrew me because she knew that I was getting expelled, and I got homeschooled. And this whole time, I started working at this barn at 12, this racetrack, or it's like a racetrack barn, and I would go to work, and I would be in my going out clothes, and I'd be in high heels, and I'm going to shovel poop and work with horses. I'm not supposed to be in high heels and going out clothes. And he would hand me the bridle, and I would just vomit. And he was like, "Are you blowing out?" And I was like, "Nope." And I told him I had food poisoning. I always said I had food poisoning, and they're not stupid, And those people that I worked for were the ones that took me to my first AA meeting, because they had someone who got sober in Alcoholics Anonymous. And thank God she knew, because even though I didn't stick around, I knew the seed was planted at that point. So I was working for them, from 12, kept on working for them. When I got kicked out of high school, I got homeschooled, which really I was not homeschooled. I had this poor lady get sent to me, and I would tell her these sob stories. I was always lying to people and trying to make her feel bad for me so I didn't have to do any work, And that's what I did through high school. I cheated my way through all of it. I got my friends to do my work. Someone's making noise, sorry. I would tell them I'd give them drugs or something, so that they could do my work, and I got by somehow. I was in all these AP courses, and I failed all the tests. You do the course and then you take the test at the end. I failed all those things, and looking back, I don't think I really learned much at all from high school, and that was my fault, not theirs. And I was continuing to work. I was out of school making a ton of money. I started dating a drug dealer. And he was the same, his father was the one that got my dad locked up in prison, so my mom hated him, from the beginning. But I thought that's the life that I wanted to live. And it's looking back, I realized, I had all these dreams before I started drinking alcohol. I thought that I wanted to go to medical school, and I wanted to continue to ride horses and go to college for horseback riding. And I wanted to do these things. And I also was kind of people would always tell me, "Oh, I bet you won't go to college because no one in your family has." And part of me was like, "Screw you, watch me." And that was my only motivation to do things half the time. But, sometimes it was good and sometimes it was not. And so anyways, I had all those dreams and aspirations, and alcohol took precedence over everything in my life. And I was doing what I wanted to do. I wasn't able really, I had a fake ID, and I was going to biker bars. And my friends were all hanging out at biker bars, and they were shooter girls, and that was pretty much the lifestyle that I had. And I really thought that I was having a good time, and my friends I thought were my best friends, and some of them were good friends, but a lot of them have either died or locked up or are in rehab today. And they always said they would say to their daughters or some of my guy friends, we don't want you hanging around that Cox girl. That's my last name. And it's pretty amazing, the gift of AA. I've had at least two of the moms, and one recently contacted me and asked me how I got sober and how her daughter can get sober, you know, and that was the one, like, she was one of my best friends, and her parents did not want me near her. And that's a gift of Alcoholics Anonymous, you know, like, first you don't want me around, and now they want me around and want me to come visit and want me to try to talk to the daughter and tell her how I got sober. So it's just pretty neat how AA works. But anyways, I ended up getting back in high school. I really don't know how. I can't even remember how that worked out. And this whole time, the only thing I kept doing was riding horses and working at that racetrack barn. So I got back in high school, and I knew I wanted to go to college for the equestrian team, but I didn't know if I would get in because I kept failing all like the tests, like the SAT and ACT or whatever it is. And I got accepted to Bridgewater College, which is a private school in Virginia, and it's a dry campus, so it is not for the alcoholic at all. And not only is it a dry campus, but they are strict. Like, you get 3 strikes and you're out. And I remember my dad took me, and he dropped me off with a big box of 6 half-gallons of Captain Morgan, and he was like, "Don't get in trouble." And I remember, like, I think I really thought, like, all right, I won't get in trouble. Like, it's going to be different. Like, you know, and people made jokes when I was younger about being an alcoholic, and I was like, there's no way I'm an alcoholic. Like, I was 15 at my first AA meeting, and I think they were saying even before that, because I was such an obnoxious drunk, and I was just laughing, like, oh, yeah, like, I hadn't lost a husband or kids, but I had neither of them. And I always thought, like, an alcoholic is someone under a bridge who had nothing, and you know, I had some things, but looking back, I really didn't have anything of, like, substance. I didn't have great friendships. And all of my best friends I had used and abused, and the people that were in my life, I only had them in my life because they either had alcohol, drugs, or other things that I wanted, period. You know, so I guess if I were to judge myself then, I would say I pretty much had nothing. Anyway, so he drops me off at college, says not to get in trouble, and gives me alcohol. And this whole time, like, I've been playing my mom and my dad against each other for years. Like, I knew I could tell my dad, Mom didn't do this, and vice versa, and that one of them would do it because they were always in a war for years. And, you know, my dad took me to get my tongue pierced and all this stuff when I was really young. And my mom found out, and like 3 weeks later, she took me to get it done. It was just like a power, like, she wanted to take me. And so I knew if I wanted alcohol, he would get it for me. And so he took me to school, gave me alcohol, and that very first night of college, I ended up at a different campus, a different university called James Madison University. And, like, that was my attempt at changing my environment, starting over, living a different life. And there I was. Luckily, it was a sorority house, not a fraternity house. They called my dad, and they're like, your daughter's at this address, come get her. You know, and my drinking career really took off at that point. I mean, I, within the first month, got my first warning at that school, and then by the end of the semester, so by December, I got my 3 strikes, and that normally is 3 strikes and you're out. And all 3 of them were for fighting and drinking, because I would start drinking and running my mouth, like always. And I remember at one point, they came into the dorms and tried to make me pour out my half-gallon of Captain Morgan, and I threw a fit. Like, I was not pouring that out. And I remember, so I met this guy named Dean Miracle during this period, who was the dean of students, and I was like, Dean Miracle, he is definitely a miracle in my life now. And at the time, I did not think that. And so I met him, and through getting in all this trouble, and he gave me an opportunity to go to outpatient treatment before kicking me out of school. And during this time, I had gotten kicked off the equestrian team. I had lost a roommate. I kind of lost/kicked her out. I don't even know really what happened. And she was like, had never done alcohol, drugs. She did nothing before coming to become my roommate. And then that girl, you know, it was very different after she was my roommate for a little bit. But so Dean Miracle said he'd give me a fourth chance if I were to go to outpatient, and that was when I decided to get sober the first time. That was in January of 2007, and I got a home group out there in Harrisonburg, Virginia, and it was called Welcome Home Group. And I remember, I still don't even think I admitted I was an alcoholic at that point, but I knew that my life had gotten really unmanageable, and I knew that my attempt at, like, changing environments or changing alcohol and changing different types of things like that didn't work, you know. And I also, at this point too, like, I had to escalate with some other drug dealer guy. Everyone else is like in BMWs and really nice cars, and I'm out there like a different breed in this university. You know, and I go to this home group, and they say, welcome, kid, and they talk to me about Alcoholics Anonymous, and they picked a sponsor for me, and they gave me service commitments, and I was like, I don't even know what people are talking about. I was so mad, but I also at the point where I didn't really have a choice, because the dean told me if I didn't do it, then I couldn't come back. And So I ended up doing AA for a little while. I stayed sober like 2 weeks shy of a year. And through this period, I didn't really use my sponsor. I did make coffee. I would go to some AA convention, like camp out things, and take 10 hours to get ready. Not really, but I did take like 3 hours to get ready. And I remember them being like, get out of the camp house. You know, like I would go and do these things, and I had a good time, but I didn't have any relief from my addiction and from the desire to drink alcohol. Like I still wanted to drink, and I just got by hanging out with other people in the program. And it was in, I think, November, so I got sober in January. In November, I got my first felony charge as a member of AA, but I really wasn't working this program, so I don't know if I'd call me a member. And I ended up taking the college car out for a four-wheeling, like, escapade / it wasn't supposed to be totaled, and then we totaled it, you know, and they all asked me if I got drunk, and I didn't get drunk. I wasn't working these steps. And what I have learned that if I take away alcohol and I don't have a solution, then I'm crazier than ever. Just because I'm not drinking doesn't mean that things get better in my life. And if anything, they get worse because I'm just treating people really poorly. And I'm not blacked out and I'm not passed out, so I'm like actively moving around causing harm. And anyway, so I wrecked this college car, and I thought to myself, well, if I tell him, he won't charge me because of myself and another girlfriend. And it was Chief Paserno, the same guy who I got in trouble with, like, all the entire first, 6 months or a year, whatever it was. And I remember telling him, and it was like the next day he'd call me back, and I was thinking, oh, he's going to tell me, you know, like, we'll fix the car, it'll be fine. And he took me to jail, you know, like he was not having it. And I'm looking back, I'm so grateful that someone actually put their foot down, because all the other times I got in trouble, they said, if you do community service, we'll sign off on everything and you'll have nothing on your record. So at one point I became a volunteer firefighter, because the guys were like, I was supposed to do 200 hours, and they told me if I became a volunteer firefighter, they would sign off on all my hours. I said, that's what I would do, you know, and I always thought I was like a fortunate drunk because I never got in trouble, and I had nothing on my record, and at this point they were done with me doing that, you know. Chief Paserno took me into jail, they charged me, they made us pay back like $5,000 each. I think the car was worth $2,000 total. It was like the most beat up car, and they made me do that, pay the money, and then I stayed sober maybe a week or two after that, and I told my sponsor I didn't think I was an alcoholic, and they told me to try some controlled drinking. And that is what I suggest to any sponsee that tells me they don't think they're alcoholic, because for me, I learned real quick. You know, I told them I was too young. People told me if I matured, I would drink differently. I thought I had matured, and I thought I could control my drinking. They said, let us know how it goes, kid, and come back. And they said something like, we'll see you soon. And, you know, I remember I was going home for Christmas, and I said, well, I never really tried to have one or two drinks because I always just wanted the effect produced by alcohol. I didn't really think drinking for, like, the taste was even worth my time. And I started with having, like, the pints, and then I got the fifth, and then I got half gallons, and it was like I would fight. This poor boyfriend I had all this time through high school. I mean, I gave him black eyes, bloody lips. Like, if he didn't get me what I wanted, I was throwing a fit. You know, I always had tantrums, and I don't know, like I said, I was going to actually try to, instead of going to get a half gallon, I was going to have one or two drinks. And I remember trying to have one. I really don't remember beyond that, honestly. And my sister was kicking me. I was on the floor, and she said, you've done it again, just screaming at me. And like my relationship with my sisters at this point, they had, you know, dabbled with drugs and alcohol, but then they stopped. They all had babies, and they stopped for their kids, and their lives changed. So when I kept doing these things, they started to push me out of their lives. And so she wasn't happy, and I remember, you know, that was my first controlled attempt at drinking, and I was blacked out, in and out of consciousness on the floor again. And I think it was a period of like 2 weeks that I ended up, my last drunk was January 15th, and that's when I was on the school field trip in D.C., and I remember, you know, convincing this girl to buy me a half gallon of Captain Morgan. I told her that I didn't have a problem anymore, that I had stopped for a year and things were going to be different. And all I know is I remember starting to have a drink at a table, and the next day I woke up and my dad was there. And this is in D.C. You know, my dad's in Waldorf, and I was in school in Virginia. So it was really confusing, but I knew he wasn't there. I went to bed, so I knew something was wrong. And he told me that I got arrested again, and they told him if he came to get me, they would let me go, and that I started fighting people when I was drunk again. And it's like whenever I got drunk, that filter was gone. And my dad told me that D-Miracle was done, that I was getting kicked out of school, and I didn't have a choice if I either had to go to treatment or I wasn't coming back to that college. So he took me back, and I remember being stuck in the car, and I was like fighting with him. And he was like, it's 28 days of your life, and it can just make your life better, so why not? And I was like, I am not going. and then we're stuck. I swear, it was like, it seemed forever, but it was at least 3 hours that we were stuck in traffic. And I finally made a decision, that I was only doing it because I wanted to go back to school, because that was like the only thing I had left. And I went back, I met with Dean Miracle, and he knew me for almost, I guess, a year and a half at that point, and he said, we refuse to watch you kill yourself. You don't see you have a problem, we all do. And at that point, I knew I knew I drank differently than my friends, but I didn't really think much else. I mean, some of them drank really heavy too and partied a lot and had a lot of fun, but they weren't having the same consequences, and they weren't damaging themselves and other people the way that I was. And the other people that I met at school, I thought I was going to change my friends and start over. I went right back to the same people, and they ended up getting caught with drugs and kicked out of college, and I was able to lie my way through and stay for a little bit longer, but I still got kicked out eventually. And anyway, so Dean Miracle sent me away to Galax, Virginia, and during treatment, so I obviously was sober, but I was still fighting people, and I got put in the psych ward again. And what they do, for me, for the psych ward, when they call the cops, is tranquilize me in the butt with some tranquilizer and send me on my way. And it was I was so resistant to anything people were saying to me, and then something changed, and I have no idea. I remember the first time I got sober, the sponsor, Nancy, that I had, she's my grand sponsor, she told me to get on my knees and pray, and I was like, I don't even know what she's talking about. Pray to what? I only prayed when I was getting arrested or in the hospital because I overdosed or I had, had alcohol poisoning, and that was the only time I prayed to God, and I would say, please get me out of this one, and I'll never do it again. And that was the extent of my relationship with God. And so I remember attempting to pray because she told me to, and I was doing that through treatment, and something changed. And, I said that, and my old sponsor was like, yeah, it's because you met a boy there. Maybe that's true. I ended up in Asheville because I had met a boyfriend in treatment, and he was in Shelby, North Carolina, and I went to a halfway house in Asheville. And I got kicked out of that for fighting again, and that was that was kind of the beginning of my sobriety this time around. I got sent to Asheville for the halfway house, and I did get kicked out of the halfway house, but I stayed sober. I got a sponsor that they chose for me, and she took me in. She kind of showed me how to live a different way of life. She told me about getting a job and going back to school at a community college, and I talked about going to AA early. I would get to class early and ask for help, which I never would do. And I didn't change overnight by any means. I was still cheating, and in early sobriety, I was still cheating and doing what I used to do and what I knew to do. And then I would feel really guilty, and my sponsor, after I'd done the steps, she would say, well, you know what to do. And I was like, well, I just want her to tell me some easy answer, please just take care of it. And instead it was going to my teachers and admitting that I had cheated on something. And I was terrified, I was going to get kicked out of school. And the 2 times that I did that, and the 2 times that it had happened, they were more forgiving than I ever could have imagined. And they had known all along, and they said that, we knew, we were just waiting for you to come to us. And that's another gift of Alcoholics Anonymous, is being able to admit when I'm wrong and go make things right if it's possible to make them right. So anyways, this time around, living with my sponsor at that time. I'm still not working the steps though, and I think I kept stalling at 4, and I got it almost a year again. I was getting miserable yet again. I'm still getting in fights in sobriety. I am not drinking or doing other things, but my behavior definitely wasn't anything that I would say was representing a sober person, or a happy sober person, I should say. And this guy in AA told me, he basically asked me what I was waiting for, did I want to die, and why I was so resistant to doing the steps. And he recommended asking this girl, Eleanor, to sponsor me, so I did. And she, I finally, so I guess this is around a year and a half sober, the second time that I asked her to take me through these steps. And she was a big book thumper, I was terrified of her. She wasted no time. She threw me in the big book. We met weekly, and we did book work, period. It wasn't about being my friend or, I feel like the other ones, I love them to death, but we never really talked about the steps. And with Eleanor, that's all she was about. And I finally got through my 4th step. And when I did my 3rd, I remember her telling me it was like a contract to go through with the rest of the steps. And I didn't even know. We were praying on our knees, and I was like, this is so weird. But, thank God she did that with me. And I have so much respect for her now. So I did my 4th step. I did my 5th step with her. And then right after I made amends to her, she passed away. She fell off a waterfall right outside of Asheville. And I remember, I guess I was 2.5 years sober at this point. I was so mad at God again. I had just started to believe and trust in this God of my understanding, and doing these steps and having these little bits of where it talks about in the back of the book, like the educational variety and these little spiritual experiences. Like I never had necessarily a big white light thing, but I had thought like, okay, I believe in something bigger than me. And then when she passed away, I started just to go the opposite way, you know. She was only 27 when she passed away, and her sponsor at the time called me. Her sponsor was Kathy, and Kathy said I was hysterical, and I don't even know what I was saying to her, and I was like, I can't sponsor anybody, and I can't stay sober because she's gone. And Kathy said, you know, I'll sponsor you till you find somebody, and find somebody else, and she's my sponsor today still. So I guess that was in 2010, whatever year we're in now. So anyway, so Kathy started sponsoring me, and then I had just finished a step, so I hadn't really sponsored yet, and then I ended up having about 8 girls at that one period ask me to sponsor, and I was like, dear God, like I can't sponsor all these women. And looking back, I realized that God was doing for me what I couldn't do for myself, because those girls, I did not want to go to meetings, I did not want to do these things, but then I would tell them to go to meetings, so they would call me, and I was like, oh my God, I had to go, you know, and that kept me sober. Like I remember crying, I was a hysterical mess for months. But also during that period, I was able to see the beauty of this fellowship. Everyone, before I got sober in Virginia, they came up, a lot of people. And then the people at Eleanor's funeral, she got sober in prison, and she was sober for like 6 or 7 years and had a huge impact on our community. So to be able to see the fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous come up and really support her family through that period and all her sponsees, we all got to carry her when we buried her. And I was like, what a gift, because I always thought, like, I'll stay sober, but if someone dies in my family or someone close to me, I'll probably get drunk. You know, like I always had those thoughts. And I've been able to learn that I can stay sober even when things like that do happen, but it doesn't, you know, it's not always the easiest. So Eleanor ended up passing away. I got Kathy as a sponsor. I'm sponsoring these girls. At this period, I transferred to UNCA. And the teachers, you know, I used to cuss out all my teachers, and I hated them. And then I started making really great friends at my school, like my teachers today from UNCA and AB Tech, I still talk to. And the one from AB Tech, so that was like the community college in Asheville, he messaged me 2 days ago and asked me to come speak at AB Tech, like to talk about how it affected my life, like that school and where I'm at today. And I was like, this is so weird. Like I was getting kicked out before of everywhere I went. Like I was seriously getting kicked out eventually. And, you know, it's only because I'm able to be sober and that I'm asked to do anything today. And my sponsor reminds me of that all the time. She tells me, you know, like it's not about what I'm doing, it's about Alcoholics Anonymous, and I really do believe that. So anyways, I transferred to UNCA. I ended up getting through and making some really close connections with my teachers, and I knew I wanted to go to med school, but I was still too scared, and like no one in my family had gone to college, and I had one sister finish high school, but I was like, I just don't know. Like I knew that's what I wanted to do, but I was full of fear, and people in AA said that, you know, they always were like, you can do it. I feel like people in AA always tell you can do anything. And I bought the materials to take the test before med school, and then I would just not do it. And then I did it again the following year, and I was too full of fear, and I didn't do it. And I think I did it like 3 years in a row. And then I went to take the test, and I knew that there were things that I was like, you know, behind in, but I wasn't willing to look at them. And I had to ask for help. I had to audit classes and go back, and I had to work on my reading. Was by far the lowest on that exam, and it was like really behind. And if I read my first book cover to cover in Alcoholics Anonymous, you know, like I told my sponsor at the time, and she was like, okay. Like I think she didn't really understand, but for me that was a big deal. Like it was my first book, you know, and cover to cover. And so I ended up asking these people at UNCA for help. And I took the exam. I didn't do as well as I needed to do. And people in AA have taught me that if you don't get the result that you want or do as well, to keep trying and taking action. And I had this, you know, the sponsor I have, I know when I call her what she's going to say. She's not going to tell me to go home and take a bath or take a nap, as much as I want to hear that sometimes. She tells me to go to a meeting, find a newcomer, like take action, and that my thoughts will follow. And it's like sometimes I feel like not even calling her because I know what she's going to say, but it's like thank God that I have someone who's honest with me and doesn't tell me what I want to hear, but tells me the truth. And anyway, so I kept doing what I was supposed to do and kept sponsoring people, and I had a home group. I had the home group that Eleanor used to have, and I was trying to do service work. She always tried to get me to do service, and she would sign me up for like 2-year commitments. And I would get so mad. I would fight with her, and I would have text wars. And you know, after she died, I started to do service work, and I was like, I wish I would have done it when she was alive, but at the same time I knew, like she planted a service seed in me that like no one else had ever met. and I started doing GSR work and doing corrections things and treatment center stuff, and that really changed my sobriety. Like, I felt a part of like I never had before, you know, and all the things I said I would never do sober, I started doing, and it's amazing to watch women like in the prison that I go to now on Wednesday nights, because she got sober in prison. I get to go to this prison meeting and watch these women. And I was speaking there a couple weeks ago, and this lady jumps up, and I was like, oh my God, there's going to be a fight. My mom told me this was going to happen in prison. And she jumps up, and I had said something about my sponsor falling off a waterfall, and she said, Eleanor, I used to sponsor her. You know, and I was like, oh my God, like Sandy's in prison, Sandy has life, you know, and Sandy got Eleanor sober, and Eleanor got me sober, or helped me get sober. And it's like, I told her, I was like, I probably never would have gotten sober when I did or how I did if you hadn't gotten Eleanor sober, you know, and I never would have met Sandy if I weren't going to the meetings in the prison. So it's just crazy. And like, as soon as I start to doubt God, or to start, you know, think twice, like things like that happen, and how can I not believe? So anyways, I ended up taking this test again and doing better, and through this period I also wanted to start traveling. I wanted to go to Spain and learn Spanish, and I was terrified to go out of the country I never gone out of the country sober, and the last time I went out of the country they had a search party for me in Aruba, and it was like I disappeared, and it was a horrible experience, and I was like really scared it was going to be that way, and I was just nervous about AA, and I emailed the people, the AA like office there, and ended up, they told me about the meetings, and I got involved with AA as soon as I got there, and they didn't do AA like I thought they should, and sometimes they had like 2-hour meetings, and they were up and down, and Spanish ones, they had these big old mustaches, I couldn't even see what they were saying, you know, and I just remember sitting there and crying, and then my host mom wanted to speak English with me, she couldn't, and that was how they wanted me to learn, but I was so frustrated, and I remember talking to my sponsor via Skype, and, you know, sticking it out, because she told me to keep taking action and doing the right thing, and thank God I did. I was able to travel. The lady that I ended up emailing about AA meetings became one of my dearest friends, and she worked for the American Embassy and got put in Rwanda later, so I went to go to Rwanda to be with her like a year later after that and do volunteer work, and she really opened my eyes to AA being everywhere in this world, or most places in this world. And in Rwanda, the closest meeting was like 3.5 hours from where I was, and I had to ride like a motorcycle and then ride a bus, and then got to the meeting finally, and they didn't speak English. It was Kenya, Rwanda. They didn't have many materials, but they had some, and it's like that's what I was taught about. That's where our money goes. A lot of times it sends materials to people who don't have it. And I knew who the newcomer was because they were crying, or I think they were the newcomer. They could have just been crying. And, you know, I was able to travel all over and stay sober, and it's because it talks about in the big book, like we can go anywhere in this world, and, you know, with God and with this fellowship, and like even though I may not be with y'all when I'm over there, wherever I am, I still have everyone in my heart, and that's another gift of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I was getting kicked out of everywhere before I got sober, and I never thought I could leave my hometown, let alone leave the country and have a really good time. So anyways, I finally applied to medical school. I wanted to go to UNC. I went there when I got sober in 2008, and I said that was my dream school. And I was terrified because I had that stuff on my record. And then they asked in the application, they wanted to know, like, even if you hadn't been officially charged, they wanted to know about it. And I was like, what? They wanted to know about, like, all the drinking and fighting. Like, I knew it had happened. The dean knew it happened, but no one else did. And I was back and forth about if I should say that, and my sponsor and people in AA told me to be honest. And so I ended up putting everything on it, and it went way better than I ever could have expected. You know, they basically just wanted to see that I hadn't drank for a while and that my life had changed, and they accepted me to that school. And I remember when they told me, I was so confused. I didn't think, you know, for years I thought that I could never do these things, that I had all these dreams, but I thought they were impossible to reach. And people in AA would tell me, if you continue to trust God, clean house, and help others, anything's possible. And I would sit there and be like, in my head I'm thinking, y'all are lying. And I don't know, like, they're not lying. So if you're new, trust God, clean house, and help others. That is like the 3 things I guess they would say to me that they helped, and they still help today. And so I got accepted at school, and then I started freaking out about money and trying to help my dad because he's really sick right now. And ever since he got out of prison, he's really struggled with finances. And my old grand sponsor, Nancy, the one who, you know, always told me to do trust God and help others and all that, she kept telling me still to trust God and help others. And it's the same one. She came to visit me all over the world. Whenever I would travel, she would come, and she became like a family member to me. And it's pretty wild. She like put me in her will. I was like, people were seriously banning me from their families before, and now I was like, she's a part of my family for forever. Like, I talked to her before I was coming here. Anyway, so she kept telling me to do what I knew to do, and I was terrified and full of fear, but I kept doing stuff in AA. And I remember the dean calling me and telling me I wanted to offer me a full ride to UNC. And here I'm thinking that school, like, I'm not good enough for this school, and that I can't do it because I have a record, and that I'm not, cut out for this because my family didn't go to school. And then people in AA showed me a different way, So I ended up I'm in school now, I'm in my third year, and I just went back to Asheville for my hospital training, for like 1 year of my hospital training. And so I get sent back to like to be in my dream school, and sent back to Asheville, where I was sent originally, really not, kind of by choice, because it was closer to the boy I wanted to be with, but like beyond that, it was not by choice. And I get to today. This year has been hard. Like, my sponsor always says at least 3 meetings a week minimum, period. And there are times, like Saturday, I was stuck in the hospital from 6 a.m. to 9:30 p.m. And I'll be cussing and calling Kathy, and I'm like, I don't want to do this. And she's like, really? Because 4 or 5 years ago, where did you want to be? And it's like, this is exactly where I wanted to be, and I can forget, and I can get really ungrateful and think it's too hard, and I don't want to do it. And the last thing, I know, we're running out of time, but this past week in the hospital, 2 of the sickest people we had, one was 31 and one was 34, and a girl and a guy, and both were dying from the disease of alcoholism and addiction. And I've never seen people so sick in my entire life, and in the ICU. The one literally stopped breathing twice, like dead, and like coming back, and sitting there and talking to these patients is a great reminder of exactly where I could be today. Like, I could be me in that ICU, in that bed. And I don't ever want to forget that. Today my life is a lot different than it used to be. I haven't been in a fist fight in like 2 years. And I know it's, my sponsor was like, what are you doing? And it is progress, but it has taken a long time. Like, I have learned to grow up in Alcoholics Anonymous, and it's been hard. Like, my natural instinct a lot of time is to go off like that. Like, my mom used to cuss out teachers with me, like, she is so feisty. And it's been a huge, it's like, what a blessing and a gift to learn in Alcoholics Anonymous, how to do like the basic things, like shower and take care of myself, and actually pay for my own things and not steal and manipulate others, and how to treat other human beings, and like respect my professors and ask them for help and not cuss them out when they give me the grade that I deserved anyways, and one of my sponsees asked me to be in her delivery, and it went really wrong, and she had to get emergency surgery. Baby lived, thank God, but I was like, what a blessing to be asked to be in a delivery of a sponsee. My sister asked me to be in her delivery like 3-4 weeks ago, and she used to ask me never to come around the kids. And then when I had another sponsee ask me to be in her wedding, and I was like, this is such a different life than what it used to be like. Like, I really thought, like, when I was in the psych ward, I was like, these are my people. Like, we had fun in the psych ward, and the ones like chucking chairs across the room, and I was like, yeah, like, having a blast. And that was like that's where I thought I was going to be. And I was like, I get to have so much fun in Alcoholics Anonymous and do it sober, and I've had every birthday since 18 in AA, and if you would have told me that in the beginning, I would have told you no way. I thought I had to have alcohol to have fun, and today I have a God of my understanding, and sometimes this year has definitely been challenging, where I'm seeing people die and so sick, and making me think, why does that happen to people? And it's like, I get to go to Alcoholics Anonymous and get reminded, working with newcomers, on a daily basis, that it's not about me, and that these steps, like the 3rd, the 7th, and the 11th step prayer, they're never about me. It's like, get me better so I can be of more service to other people. And I'm just really grateful to be sober and to be here with y'all. Thanks.